Hi, I'm Trisha Taylor, and this is the Leader's Journey podcast. So, we're in a series right now about communication, which just seems very appropriate since communication is just everywhere and it's linked to almost everything we do and almost all the problems that we identify. So, we are looking at the very basics of communication. That podcast is called How to Have a Conversation. And we're also looking at some of the complexities of our communication. And today we're going to talk about how communication works in an organization, whether that's a small congregation or a large company. And so I am just really glad to get to talk to Rick Rarick today. Rick is a member of our team. We are so lucky to have him on our team. He's a leadership coach, and his work as a coach comes out of his real life experience in the real world. This is just scratching the surface, but he was for many years an HR and management development executive with Levi Strauss, Coca-Cola, Fiserv, Invesco, several companies that you recognize. And so, like I said, we are really lucky to have him on our team. He is also a long-term lay leader in a congregation, and he has helped congregations of different kinds navigate organizational challenges. He helps them find ways to create strong cultures, especially for their church staff. This is something that he's working on with us. So if that sounds interesting to you, get in touch with us at theleadersjourney.us and we can get you more information about that. Let's see, he's a member at First Presbyterian Church of Rockport, and he and his wife Linda are parents to 4 grown kids, and in his words, 2 almost perfect dogs. And so you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Rick today as we talk about what leaders need to be looking for in their organizations in terms of how communication flows, and then a lot of the complexities that go from there. Let's see, just a reminder, you can catch us on YouTube at The Leader's Journey if you'd rather have the video version of this. Otherwise, just a reminder, don't forget to check the blog every week if you want to just see more about what we are thinking about and learning at The Leader's Journey. So we're going to dive right into our conversation with Rick.
That's the whole thing around asynchronous and synchronous communication and learning, is that everything you're doing is asynchronous. You're getting your message out there loud and clear, but it's bouncing back, and you're not even aware of the fact that people are not hearing what you're saying.
Rick, so excited to be here with you today to talk about communication. You already know this, but to let everybody else know, we're doing a quick series all the way from the very basics of communication to some of the things that are a little more complicated. And I'm excited to get into some of those more complicated things with you today.
Yeah, these are they're complicated, but they're fun to talk about, and they're certainly important. So I'm glad we're having this conversation, Trisha.
Everybody is going to be able to recognize themselves, I think, in this. So let's just jump in. You have been an executive level leader in multiple organizations, and we want to talk about how communication flows in organizations. So I want to just open up a lane for you to say what you see from where you sit. But I want to start with this question. Let's assume that a leader is on the balcony. They are looking at communication from the balcony, and they're not sure exactly what they should be looking for. Well, what would you say to them?
I think, so first of all, maybe the most important thing that we should start with is that communication is not an event. It is a process, and it is part of your culture. You either have it or you don't. And a good analogy for that would be a family. So if the only time that the family ever communicated was when there was some big announcement, we're going on vacation, we're renovating the kitchen, and mom or dad made some pronouncement and everybody else listened, and then they just didn't talk to each other about much of anything important until the next big announcement. And that is oftentimes the way that leaders see communication in an organization is, if I have something big to say, how do I say it? And then how do I kind of move on to more important things like running the business or running the church or whatever it may be. And so it's real important, I think, to kind of set the stage for this by saying that communication is best served when it is part of your culture. When there is a culture of continuous communication that at all levels, between levels, within levels, and that it is based on common respect, understanding, and the ability to listen to each other.
Mm-hmm. Common respect, understanding, and the ability to listen. We solved that, and we solved the whole thing. Huh?
Well, it certainly gets us a lot further down the road than not doing that. Yeah.
So one thing you're looking for is, I think I heard one is communication continuous.
Yes.
Or does it just happen at the big high anxiety or high initiative events? And then also the quality of the communication. Is it respectful? Does it involve listening? Is it mutual, and so forth?
That's correct.
When we're thinking about how the communication, is it continuous? One thing that comes to my mind is not communicating is also communicating, right?
Yeah.
If we only hear from the leader when something's wrong, for example, or when they want us to do something, that communicates something.
That's
but
right.
Talk to me about the variety of the kinds of communication that we should be looking for in the organization.
Well, I think that, so first of all, if it's continuous, then it isn't you don't put it in various buckets. You don't have the big announcement, then you don't have the feedback meeting, then you don't have maybe the team meetings where they discuss things. If it is just part of your culture, all of that tends to work together, and there's a seamless flow of communication from one type to another, and they support each other and reinforce each other. Here's a good example. Oftentimes leaders will make the mistake when they have something big to talk about is that they will make an announcement and they think that's that. What they don't realize is that the folks that are working in the organization will more often than not trust their immediate supervisor more than they will the person at the top. They spend more time with their supervisor knows them better. And so the first thing they might do is go to their immediate supervisor and say, what's this all about? If the top of the house has not educated the supervisors on this is what we're going to talk about, and this is how you need to reinforce it, then there's a lot that gets lost in translation.
So we have to communicate about how we're communicating.
That's correct.
We and do that at multiple levels.
That's correct. And often, go ahead.
No, please.
Oftentimes what you'll see happen is that if I hear something from the big boss and then I go talk to you, you're my supervisor, and I say, so Trisha, what's all this about? The best you can do is kind of reiterate what you heard, just like I heard it. And then you might say, well, I think this is what we're talking about. If you haven't had some time to really understand the context of what's being said, understand the big picture and why we are where we are, how we got here, then it's really hard for you to do anything more than just parrot whatever was on the announcement or the video or however the big boss decided to talk about things. So first line supervisors are critical in making sure the message is heard correctly and that people have a chance to respond to it.
Which means if I'm a first line supervisor, I'm not the big boss, but I am a first line supervisor, I'm going to have to put some time and energy into that. Time and energy that I may not feel like I have, to be sure I understand what's being communicated, that I can put it into my own words, that I'm not, this is one thing I think we see a lot, I'm not giving you the words I've heard, but also a lot of anxious patter that goes with it.
That's correct.
And nonverbal communication where I tell you what the big boss said, but then I roll my eyes, or, I tell you everything I think is wrong with that. which is mostly just anxiety clouding the communication, but that I can accurately take what's coming to me and pass it accurately to you.
That's correct. And if you look at huge corporations like a Google or an Amazon or those kind of firms, there are so many levels between the CEO and the person that's doing the work. But sometimes what they do is they'll actually go to supervisors and say, this is what we're going to talk about tomorrow, and here's a series of questions that you may be asked, and here are the answers to those questions. So preparation is key. Now, in a church with 10 employees or a company with 30 employees, obviously it's not that elaborate, but it's still a matter of making sure there's consistency in the message all the way through, and that you've thought about what questions people might have, and how do you best respond to them?
So let's talk about that smaller organization for a minute, because here's one of the things that I see happening. Let's say an organization with more than 10 employees. Yeah. And often you have the person at the center or at the top, the lead pastor, maybe the CEO of the company. And because of the size of the company, everyone wants to hear it straight from that person. Right? They feel diminished if that person in charge doesn't come to them personally to deliver the message, right? And it engenders all kinds of competitiveness, and their hurt feelings. And if I had, maybe the top boss isn't my supervisor, but because we're a small group, and maybe because someone at some point very unwisely said that we were a family, I feel diminished if the person in charge isn't talking to me directly. What do we do about that?
It's great. That's a great question. And that's a real issue. To the extent that you can, you ought to include as many people as possible. Now, if you have 30 people on your staff, that doesn't mean 30 conversations. That might mean a longer meeting with more people. It might mean that you do it in 2 tranches, or if you can get everybody together, you just do it one time. But the point is that try to be sensitive to the fact that the size and scope of your organization is really important in how you communicate. The great thing about being the leader of a 10-person organization is you have that opportunity, that flexibility to meet with everybody all at once. You can't do that if you're the CEO of Google, but you can certainly do that if you're the pastor of a church or the president of a small company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe one difference is that nobody expects the CEO of Google to do that.
That's right.
But, everyone, often to the most part-time nursery worker, feels like the pastor should tell them directly what's happening. And in a team of 10, maybe that's doable. But I think that's something worth looking at. I think sometimes organizations can't grow because they can't get out of that mindset that the person at the top has to talk with every single person.
That's correct.
Yeah. Or else it's insulting.
And there's another dynamic that happens in churches where you have the staff, the paid staff, but you also have this adjacent group of people that are heavily invested in the growth of the church. Your lay leaders, your Sunday school teachers, the people that manage the parking lot crew on Sunday, those kind of folks. How do you communicate with them as well? Because the last thing you want to have happen is somebody shows up at church on Sunday and they hear about all these changes. They're heavily invested in the church, and they hear about it from somebody else instead of from the church itself.
Oh yeah. That's great. Yes. There are always people other than just in the org chart.
Yes.
That need the communication.
Yep.
If you're standing next to someone on the balcony, looking at the communication of their organization, what's something that you're really going to pay attention to? In other words, it might even concern you if you saw it.
Yep. Well, I think the first thing is an inconsistency in the understanding that people have of what's going on. So in other words, if I hear things one way and you hear things another way, then we're inconsistent in our perspective on it. And so it's important for the leader as they look down from the balcony to say, is everybody hearing the same thing? I can't guarantee they're going to like it. I can't guarantee that they're going to see how they fit into it, But the first thing I can guarantee is that everybody hears the same message in the same way.
Mm. And if that's not happening, that's something to get into action around pretty
Yeah.
quick.
And
Okay.
sometimes that's the hard work of finding out why. Why is it that people don't understand? And this is where the whole culture of communication can happen, where the senior pastor or the president of the company may need to just go out into the cubicles and say, tell me what you heard and why you think that's what it is. And as you begin to build that culture of feedback and communication in the organization, then this becomes an enlightening moment for you as a leader, where you say, well, my message wasn't clear last time, or it wasn't complete, or I didn't provide the context. And so just wandering out into the hall sometimes, out into the work areas and saying, tell me what you heard and what you think about it is really important.
And I noticed that you said my communication wasn't clear. I didn't get the message across.
Yeah.
Rather than what's wrong with you that you didn't
That's
understand what I
correct.
was saying. That seems important.
Yeah. Why didn't you get it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I'm thinking about, especially when things are a little more high anxiety, that some part of every meeting could be used to do what you're describing. Okay, so our meeting's almost over. What did you hear? And to
Absolutely.
just, get that back and see. I remember one time being at a conference with a very famous preacher. He was a gifted communicator, and the girl, I think she was a girl, maybe a college student, in front of me had been just taking copious notes.
Yeah.
And when we stood up to sing the closing song, she left her notebook open on her chair, and I looked at what she had written, and she had written his message exactly backwards. And I mean, what she had heard and what he had said were exactly opposite. And I just thought, if that could happen to a communicator like that, that
Yeah.
probably happens to all of us, occasionally.
One of the best work experiences I ever had was one of the companies I worked for. They would start every meeting with a check-in. How are you coming into this meeting? How are you feeling about what we're going to talk about? And then they would check out at the end, and they would say, what have you heard and what do you think? Everybody in the room. And if there were 20 people in the room, that took time. But
What have you heard and what do you think?
That's right.
Oh, yeah. I've heard, I think a lot of people do the check-in at the beginning.
Yeah.
I bet not many of us are doing that at the end.
Well, and it's because if we have a meeting for an hour, then at 5 minutes till the top of the hour, we think, oh, we got to hurry up and get out of here.
Yeah.
We don't build that kind of time in.
And what I'm thinking is that would mitigate, some of what's happening is that we're communicating okay, but then the anxiety in the system is distorting the message. And it seems like if we took the time to do that you just said, we could maybe reduce that distortion a lot.
I think so. And that's the thing. That's where one-on-one time is really important. One of the great fallacies of working is the boss that says, I have an open door policy. What that's implying is that you have to go through their door because they're not going to come out or to you. And a boss that's really, really effective is spending time almost every day with a few people saying, what are we doing well and what could we do better? To the point that somebody who's 3 or 4 levels down in the organization, in the beginning of the boss says, how are we doing? They're going to get a thumbs up, because I don't want to tell the boss this is a lousy place to work.
Yeah.
The more that you invite people into those kind of conversations and you let them know that you genuinely want to hear what they have to say, the feedback gets better, the communication gets better, and the results get better.
So when I'm thinking about how communication is flowing, I mean, as you're saying, it's constantly flowing up and down and sideways.
Yep.
But it seems like getting communication to flow up is really challenging.
Yep.
People are just reluctant to say what there is to say to someone who has power over their success.
Yeah, that the whole thing around speaking truth to power is a difficult thing for people. And so sometimes a boss has to go out of their way to say, I really do want to understand what you're thinking. And then they've got to respond appropriately. They got, it's got to be, thank you for telling me that, that the wastebaskets more often. Thank you for telling me that my sermons aren't landing for you. Thank you for telling me that, that this product we have isn't selling as well as we thought it was. Those kind of conversations are tough. But again, if you invite people into that space and you let them know that it's safe to be there, then it generates far better information than you're going to get if you just kind of send out a memo saying, this is what we're doing, and you don't listen to people and their responses to it.
So I'm thinking about leaders sitting here saying, yeah, I told people that they could tell me the truth.
Right.
But then when they did, I corrected them. I got defensive. I got real explainy to tell them why they were wrong. What do I do now? What would you say to that leader?
Well, the first thing is that what people are telling you, that's their truth. That's what they think. And whether they're, quote, wrong in your eyes or not, that's their truth. So one thing to think about is, did I really give the context for what we're talking about here? In other words, if we decide to go in a different direction with the church or with the organization, did I fully explain to people why we're doing this, what got us to this point, and what are we doing going forward? Leaders are not good at giving context. They're great in a business, are great at doing it for shareholders. They're not good at doing it for employees. And I don't, so context is really important for people to understand, because if you tell me we're going to do something and you don't tell me why, I have to make up that story for myself. I'm going to tell myself some story about why we're doing this, and it may very well likely not be the right story.
So being able to say, I guess being able to give people a window into the process that got you to what you're communicating is important.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about the importance of a leader maybe going back and saying, I told you it was safe to talk to me, and then I wasn't safe.
Yeah.
And I'd like a do-over. I'd like to try again. I was defensive, whatever it is. I just think about the power that would have, especially in some organizations, if a leader did that.
And it's super powerful. It's also very rare. You seldom see bosses going and saying, I was wrong. It strikes a chord of humility and openness that folks don't see nearly enough. And that allows them back into that space, and it allows them to be safe in that space.
I just heard a story from one of our coaches about a situation where he was coaching a group, and the leader of the company happened to be in the group. And this leader started talking about what he was learning in his individual coaching and how he wished he had shown up differently in a high twitch situation that the whole company knew about.
Yeah.
And he said, wow, the other people in that coaching group were really leaning in to hear that, because that's just so rare, and because that was important to them. I'm thinking about communicating sideways. In other words, communicating with my peers.
Yeah.
It seems like that should be the easiest thing. And yet in the organizations we work with, congregations, often that's the thing that is most missing. Yeah. Everybody's in their silo. They're all doing their work with excellence, but they're not communicating with each other.
Yep.
What's that about?
And there's this analogy that businesses use sometimes, that you do your work and you throw it over the wall and it lands on somebody else's desk, and then they throw it over the wall back to you. So
yeah.
I think one of the important things to realize is that peer-to-peer communication, you're talking to people that have at least somewhat different interests and different objectives. And that's natural. All right. if it's important to you that we get something done quickly, and it's important to me that we get it done well, and we both have our reasons for that,
Yeah.
we're both right. And yet at the same time, there's a polarity there between what you think is most important, what I think is most important, is just acknowledge the fact that not everyone is going to have the same objective or the same truth that you do. And so the ability to ask the question, like, what is it that's important to you about this? Why is it important? Is very important. It's important to do that. It's seldom not said. Typically what happens is if you want speed and I want quality, we kind of argue about it for a couple of days, and then we'll probably form a triangle. I'll go find somebody else that thinks that I'm right and bring that person in.
Yeah.
And so being receptive to somebody else's perspective is critical. Now, that's easier said than done. I'm sure everybody says that. Everybody says it's important to listen. But the fact of the matter is, it's really important to listen.
The danger is that I'm going to go in with the goal of saying, how can I get you to value what's important to me?
Yep.
Rather than how can I find a way to, yes, be able to advocate for what's important to me, but also to figure out how can I give you what's important to you.
Correct.
That's hard.
It is hard. It takes practice. Here's the thing about good communication. It's like any other skill. It's like shooting a basketball or tying a fly. It takes practice to do it well. And none of us really are going to be good at it until we fail at it a couple of times, learn from our mistakes, and do it some more.
But we don't practice, we withdraw. We just keep throwing things over the wall. I mean, that as humans, that's a lot more likely.
Either that or we escalate it into a conflict where you're wrong and I'm right.
Yeah. And then one of us is going to have enough of that.
Yeah.
And shut it down. And that wall gets higher.
That's correct.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And so the discipline of how, even if I am very busy, how am I having casual conversations with people, just getting to know them? How am I having conversations with, I had a conversation recently with a leader who I would say is what they call an elderly millennial, but everyone on their team is a millennial.
Yeah.
And finally, this leader said, I am telling you to pick up the phone. I know you hate it. I know you want to do everything in Slack. You want to text everybody all the time. But I'm telling you, when we reach this point and we don't have agreement, I don't care how anxious you are, how much you hate the phone. I'm telling you, you need to pick up the phone. And I just thought that was such a good way to kind of disrupt what was happening. They were just texting each other all the time. Nobody was listening. And now everybody knows I'm going to have to learn to get on the phone and actually talk to someone.
Well, that's the whole thing around asynchronous and synchronous communication and learning, is that if everything you're doing is asynchronous, you're getting your message out there loud and clear, but it's bouncing back, and you're not even aware of the fact that people are not hearing what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm aware. I think that if I were on the balcony looking at the flow of communication, one thing I would look for is how fast is everybody moving?
Yeah.
Because it just seems to me that if we're moving fast, we can almost guarantee that we're not completing our communication the way you just mentioned.
Yeah. And there's a difference, there's a difference with working with a sense of urgency as opposed to just going fast for the sake of going fast. And some organizations need to be able to move fast. They have to respond to changes that the customer wants, and the customer needs it in 2 days. We understand that. So it's not like everybody can take all the time in the world to understand each other. But again, if you kind of set a culture where every time we talk, we're going to talk about it this way. The first thing I'm going to ask you is, how are you feeling about this? What are you thinking? Give me your perspective. If we start by listening first and talking second, if we if we include in that context, if we include in that an opportunity for feedback, those kind of things, that even when you do have to go fast, you're doing so in a way that where you're still getting things done.
I was talking to a leader in a healthcare setting who was, she said she is always thinking who needs to be in the meeting and who needs to be in the know. And
Yeah.
I liked that so much
Yeah.
because they did not have enough time. People did not have enough availability to be in every meeting.
Yeah.
But at the end of every meeting, they said, who needs to know what we did here? And they had a method for getting that word out. And I was just very impressed by that.
Yeah, that is a great way to put it. Yeah.
So the thing about communication, the thing we're really trying to address in this series is that on the one hand, we are born communicating. It is inherent in everything we do. We are never not communicating.
Yeah.
And at the same time, almost all of our problems come down to communication.
Yep.
At some point. And so what do you see in terms of how leaders get in their own way? What should an individual, as they look in the mirror, be looking for in their own communication?
I think the first one is the whole thing around assumptions, that just because I know something, I assume that when I tell somebody else that they know it too. Keep in mind that their reality is different than my reality. Their ability to assimilate information is different. Their understanding of context is different. And so this putting the blinders on around how you communicate, when you communicate, assuming that everybody else is going to figure out what I'm talking about just by hearing it in your own. So there needs to be open-mindedness to the fact that everybody in this organization is going to do things a little bit differently. That's critical. So open-mindedness is critical. The whole thing around providing background is very important for big things. Now, obviously, I don't need to give you a background about why we need to order more paper clips, but things that are more complex, and obviously then providing background is very important. And the ability to just systemically create opportunities for people to share their perspectives on things and make it part of the culture is probably the most critical thing you can.
Being able to share your perspective and making that part of the culture, that is really challenging. And that creates a workspace people want to be in.
Yes, it does. Yeah. I mean, listen, we all want to be heard. That's the fact.
Yeah.
We all want to be heard and we all want to be listened to. It's interesting because, Gallup, every year Gallup does polls on what's most important to people in their workplace. And every boss out there thinks it's compensation. It is not compensation. Compensation is way down the list. The two most important things that people say are, I feel valued and I can see a direct connection between the work I do and the work of the organization. And the quickest way to be valued is that you are heard, you're listened to. So when we talk about communication, we think about it in terms of what am I going to say as opposed to what am I going to hear?
Yeah. Just that shift. What am I going to say? Setting that aside or making that secondary. It's still important, but it's second. Yeah. What am I going to hear?
And the hearing will inform the saying. That's the thing, is that the more you hear, the better you're going to be at saying what you have to say.
I think some leaders are afraid that if I invite input, that means I have to do what people say.
Right.
And so I don't invite input, right? Because I've already decided what I'm going to do.
Right.
And we could talk about the wisdom of that. But in terms of communication, what if it was just clear? What if I, as a leader, knew how to convey, I have heard what you said and I've taken it into account. And I still may not do it.
That's right. And people are going to be okay with that. And they're also going to be okay with the fact that the boss will say, there's some things happening I can't tell you about right now. There may be some personnel issues. There may be some financial issues where I can't tell you what's going on right now. I will tell you what I can, and you'll have to trust that there's some things we have to keep at a certain level, and we can't share them. That's okay. So I think people understand those kind of things. And yeah, you're right. If you ask 50 people for feedback, you're going to get 50 different ideas on how to do it. But as long as you're willing to say, listen, I heard what everybody had to say. I took everybody seriously. This is the direction we're going to go in. Some of you may not agree with that, but at least folks had a chance to weigh in.
And all of this speaks to what you were saying about context. Being able to say, I can't say everything is context. Yes. What's more likely, I think, is that sometimes a leader just won't say anything because they can't say everything.
That's correct.
And what you're describing is a more complex way of doing that. I also think you're exactly right about listening. I think we all think we listen better than we do. I just think that is across the board for leaders.
It is.
So it's something for all of us to work on.
Here's another wrinkle in that. When you don't give people context. So for example, a major thing happens and you say, so-and-so is no longer with the organization. That's a big announcement. That's not a conversation. That's an announcement. You don't have to provide context there. You don't have to provide a reason. But at the same time, what's going to happen in some of these situations is people are going to say, well, if that person isn't here any longer, that means I'm probably not here any longer either. And so to say so-and-so's not here anymore, we don't think there's going to be any more staffing changes. That's great.
Yeah.
Say what you can. And so that you don't put people in a position where they have to tell themselves a story in order to be comfortable.
Yes. And kind of going back to the beginning, be aware of what kind of stories people are likely to be telling themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
And out there hearing what some of those stories are. I also think just about the rate of communication. One of the things Jim Harrington says often is, when just to communicate in an organization, you have to, what you do is going to feel like over communicating. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, how many pastors have been like, I put it in the bulletin for 4 weeks. We put it on the sign. We made the announcement during worship services. We put signs in the elevator, and people are saying, well, you never told us this. Yeah. And, so we have to over communicate. But then he'll say, but when we're leading change, we have to over communicate by a factor of 10. Yeah. There just has to be so much communication.
And sometimes when people say you didn't tell me, they're really not saying that. They're saying you didn't give me a chance to tell you what I think about it. And you can't do that with a church of 500 people. 500 congregants. You can't, or an organization even with 200 employees. You can't do that all the time.
Right.
But yet, yes, I think Jim's absolutely right that if you communicate. If you think you're over communicating, you're probably doing it right. And in times of anxiety, you really do have to ramp that up.
Yeah, I like that. When I think about what I'm looking at in the mirror, the listening thing, what you said, I just think that is so important. Am I listening? But the second thing that I'm looking for in myself is, am I clearly and courageously saying what I need to be saying? Mm-hmm. Because I have a communication style. It's probably different from yours. I know it's different from a lot of leaders, but it's not a communication style. It's a communication weakness where I will hint and I will be vague, or I will use soft language like we should consider, or maybe we could. And I'm learning to say what there is to say. Yeah. And I think that's also that's a way that I have gotten in my own way that I want to learn to be different. I heard someone say the other day at a meeting, what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness. So I feel like I probably should write that on with a Sharpie somewhere. Yeah. So, well, I'm really grateful for this conversation. Thank you for
You're
doing
welcome.
this. I think people will be able to take what we've said and apply it in a whole variety of contexts. I will say, if you're listening and you're thinking about, okay, I really heard that part about culture change, let us know, because Rick and our teammate Nate have put together a whole way of working with organizations around culture change. And so just let us know if you're interested in that, getting more information. Otherwise, I'll say what I say every time. If you get to the balcony, it helps to have a coach there with you. So let us know if we can be helpful with that. You can get in touch with us at theleadersjourney.us. As always, take care, and we will see you next time.